Hi, everybody. I am Patrick Hyland, and on behalf of Gabby and Emma and the entire Remesh research team, we want to welcome you to our May webinar. Today, we're going to be focusing on a topic that seems to really be dominating not only the headlines, but just our collective life space. And it really has been a dominant theme over the past couple of months and the past couple of years, from Silicon Valley and all the exuberance around AI to the latest papal encyclia just earlier this week, all the graduation speeches and all the undergraduate pushback. It seems like everybody is talking about AI. What we want to do today is we want to focus on the impact that AI is having within organizations, specifically around organizational culture. And what we're going to do is leverage data that we just collected about 10 days ago from supervisors, managers, and senior leaders. We have a wonderful guest with us today, Elissa Gurman, and she will be introducing herself in just a couple of slides. But she and I have been looking at this data for the last 10 days, and it is really fascinating. And so, what we hope to do over the next 30 to 45 minutes, and this deck is packed with information, so it may drag on a little longer. So, if you can stay, please do, is talk through this data, explore it together, and explore it with all of you. If you have questions along the way, feel free to chat those in at any point, and we're happy to field those. We really want this to be as much of a dialogue as is possible. If you do need to drop or leave early, the webinar is recorded and we'll be sending out the deck and a recording following. But we're really excited to host this conversation. And Elissa, we are so excited to have you join this conversation with us today. So let's jump in. So here is the agenda. And if you have been to any of our webinars, this is going to look really familiar. We're going to start by putting AI in context and just set the stage. I talked about how AI is such a dominant force in our collective life space and in our organizations. And so we just want to set the stage and set up the research questions that really drove the exploratory conversation that we hosted last Monday. After we set the stage, we'll then jump into those findings. So we talked to just over 100 supervisors, managers, C-suite leaders in a cross section of 100 organizations. And we learned quite a bit about their perspective, what they're seeing and witnessing as it relates to AI, the employee experience, expectations, norms, cultures, basic assumptions. After we get through the data, we'll then talk about some implications and then questions along the way. We will carve out time at the end, dedicated block of time for questions. But if you do have questions at any point, feel free to chat those in, and Gabby and Emma will be sure to pass those along to us. So that is our agenda. Let's start with some quick introductions. So, Elissa, we are so delighted to have you here with us today. Could you tell us just a bit about yourself, a bit about your interest in this topic, and what you're hoping to get out of this conversation?
Absolutely. I'm so glad to be here today, Patrick, with you and with everyone who's joined us. My name's Elissa Gurman. I'm a principal at MacPhie. We're a boutique management consulting firm based in Toronto, and our work spans strategy, organizational development, brand strategy. My big passion is in organizational development. I love working with leaders, with teams to figure out dynamics at the team level, bigger organizational cultural goals at the organization level. I just find people really interesting. And then, so for this topic, you're right, it's everywhere. And I've been thinking a lot about AI. And when I approached this topic, I really was excited to do this study because my position is also one of exploring. I have a lot of thoughts about how AI is impacting organizational culture. And I think to imagine that it is having no impact is fiction. Anything so disruptive and so destabilizing is bound to change the way people engage in the workplace and the way people feel about the workplace. And so I was looking forward to today as a way to get deeper into this question and to move from my own observations, assumptions, anecdotes into something that is just a little more data backed, and to have this conversation with you. So I'm glad to be here.
Wonderful. That's exciting to hear. And as you do your consultative work, are you starting to notice more questions about AI and culture and team dynamics and leadership?
I think there's lots of questions about AI. I'm not sure a lot of people have been thinking about culture and leadership when it comes to AI. I think people are thinking about use cases and efficiency and productivity and getting past barriers. And I think we see that in the data here, right? People are interested in accuracy and productivity.
Mm,
But I think as we move to a culture that's biased towards speed, what is gained and what is lost, as we are managing and leading people who are using AI, what has to change about how we manage and lead? As leaders use AI, what has to change about how we collaborate? So I think there is a role, frankly, for people like me to kind of push that question and to say, okay, as you're thinking through your AI strategy, are you thinking about how this is going to impact people and how it's going to impact how people work together, collaborate,
mm.
innovate, and feel at your organization? And frankly, I
Got it.
think a lot of organizations are not thinking in that direction. And I don't mean it as a slight in any way. I just think that's not the general focus of that conversation around AI.
Good. Wonderful. I think that's a really interesting first observation. We haven't even jumped into the data, but based on what you're seeing in your own consultative work, what I'm hearing you say is a lot of people are focused on the technology and a lot of people are focused on the benefits. Not enough people in important roles within organizations are thinking about the impact on employees, the workforce, culture, the way that work gets done.
I mean, AI is exciting. It is exciting. I'm excited too, and there's so much good that can come. But I think there's also the feeling of being left behind, and so the feeling of moving and going, and not always taking that time to look at the whole picture of what we're integrating into our organizations.
Good. Wonderful. One quick question. I'm going to put you on the spot. What is your, and you don't need to answer this question, but what is your personal perspective on AI?
So I use AI all the time, and I enjoy using it. Sometimes I'm a little bit afraid of it. AI has come into every part of my life. I mean, I'm a parent. There's an Alexa in my kid's room. It just updated and now it's a full AI and she talks to it. And I'm terrified, right? Do I need my 8-year-old talking to an AI? Um, so I guess I am an adopter, but I am a nervous adopter, would be my stance. I
Wonderful.
worry that if I lean on it too much, parts of myself that I feel are defining to who I am may atrophy over time. How's that for an answer? But I do use it multiple times a week.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And thank you for being put on the spot and for articulating your positionality as it relates to AI. I think it's really important for us as consultants to be able to articulate where we are personally and how that relates to the work that we're doing and the data that we're seeing. Um, so I think that that to me resonates, I think, with my own perspective on AI. So just quickly, for those of you who don't know me, I am Patrick Hyland. I am the Director of Employee Research at Remesh. I've been in the field longer than I care to admit, but essentially 25 years. Most of that was doing traditional engagement surveys. And for the past 5, 6 years, I've been using Remesh, I think, quite extensively to do really fascinating exploratory research that just generates insights that extend beyond traditional engagement surveys or traditional surveys. So, look, my own perspective on technology for anybody that knows me or anyone that cares to know my perspective on this stuff, I'm tech skeptical and AI skeptical. That said, as I use AI to do research, as I use AI with Remesh, what I am finding is that its ability to generate insights at pace, at speed, is remarkable. And we're going to feature some of those insights throughout today's deck as we move into the data itself. Um, so I am seeing the power of AI. It really is remarkable from an insights generating perspective. But I also do think, similar to you, Elisa, that we do need to be cautious. And I think we're going to see some of that in the data that we gathered from these 105 leaders is quite a bit of optimism and hope and already early signs of the power of AI, but all of that mixed in with a healthy degree of skepticism and concern and anxiety about how AI could be misused. So it's interesting that our own positionalities, I think, are to some extent going to be reflected in the data that we look at. So without further ado, let's jump in. So thank you for that introduction. Let's start by putting AI in perspective and I think the tension that I'm going to set up here is one that many of you in the audience are probably living and seeing and feeling in your own organizations, and perhaps in your own life. AI is changing the world, and it is changing the world rapidly and dramatically. There are so many stats out there we could have pulled. I pulled these three. Research supported by Harvard is finding that 58% of the US population uses generative AI. The rate of adoption is faster than any other recent technology, including the internet and the personal computer. 88% of employees said that their organization uses AI in at least one business function, according to research by McKinsey and Company. And 98% of CEOs in a recent study by Workday think that their organization would immediately benefit from AI implementation. Sam Altman, CEO, OpenAI, says AI will be the most powerful technology ever created by humanity, and it has the potential to improve every single aspect of our lives. So this is one side of the perspective around AI, that AI is going to, and already is, dramatically not only transforming and disrupting, but improving everything about life. That obviously countered with the counter narrative. If AI is changing the world, I think the question we really need to be asking as consultants, as citizens, as people, as parents is, are these changes for the better or for the worse? 34% of global respondents are more concerned than excited about the increased use of AI in everyday life, according to research from the Pew Research Center. In fact, what they found is only 16% are more excited than concerned about the use of AI in everyday life. So quite a bit of anxiety that we are seeing globally. 65% of Americans think AI will reduce jobs in the US, and 82% of global policy professionals believe AI needs more government regulation. Pope Leo, just 2 days ago, in his first encyclical, talks about, in an unprecedented way, the impact of AI. And what he talked about on Monday was AI now demands to be disarmed. And he admitted that those were strong words, freed from the logics that turn it into an instrument of domination, exclusion, and death. This tension that we're seeing in these two quotes, one from Sam Altman, the other from Pope Leo, and the different impact that AI could have and is having on society, really served as the two tension points and the two pillars of the research study that Elisa and I designed and fielded last week. And so what we said to ourselves was, as we enter this brave new world of AI, how is it affecting workplace norms, practices, assumptions, behavior, culture, essentially? Is it having a positive or a negative impact on the employee experience? What can leaders and managers and supervisors and employees do to navigate this transition? And if we want to build healthy cultures and workplaces, as IO psychologists, as OD professionals, as internal consultants, as employee listening leads, what can we do to navigate this disruption that seems so promising and seems to also be putting so much at peril? Let me pause here, Elisa, and just see As we frame this up, were there any questions that you were particularly interested in or curious about before we launch into the field study itself?
I wanted to see what people thought because I know my own anxieties and my own concerns. And I think AI from a culture perspective is impacting communication, collaboration, leadership, accountability. I did not want to put those words in people's mouths. And so I was interested in the open-ended questions, the top of mind responses to see what was on the minds of the people that are using AI every day in the workplace. So I was, I just wanted to hear, I guess, from people.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, and look, I mean, that is the power of mixed method research. That is the power of exploratory research. And that is really, I think, a large part of why going out and just listening to critical stakeholders can generate so much rich insight. Um, so thank you for sharing that. I think what I was curious about as we did this is to what extent are organizations proactively managing this disruption and this change? And as they try to actively manage that, what works and what doesn't? So we will keep all these questions in mind, but let's then jump in with these research questions that we started with, and with those really underlying questions that we both had. What we did was we went out and essentially asked a cross section of leaders and organizations about what they're seeing based on their own experience. And so, what we want to do over the next handful of slides is really walk you through what we did and what we found. So, just to provide a bit of context for everybody, we wanted to understand AI's impact on the employee experience. And so, what we did was a field study last Monday, May 18th. If you have been to any of these monthly webinars, we use the same process that we do each month. We conducted a Remesh Flex session and we recruited 105 supervisors, managers, and leaders through the platform, through on-platform recruit. And we used, to Elissa's point, a mixed method approach because we wanted to ask a combination of open-ended questions and closed-ended questions. In total, we had 11 questions, and we'll show you those results. If you have not participated in a Remesh session, drop us a note. We'd love to show you what that looks like. But if you have, you know that as part of the process, you have this ability as a participant to endorse or upvote those open-ended comments that resonate with you, that you agree with. And that really provides us, from an analytical perspective, with some unique insights that we'll show you. And so as we looked at this data together, Elissa and myself, it really does generate a tremendous amount of insight. One thing that stands out to me from a research perspective is the information power that Remesh provides. And what I mean by that is this is, of course, a small exploratory study. It consists of just 105 leaders. The generalizability of this study is limited. I would not generalize these results to your own organization, but from an exploratory perspective, in terms of generating hypotheses and the ability to understand the concerns that exist across organizations, this really is a powerful study because of the open and closed-ended nature of it, and just because of the depth of insight that we're able to gather. If you look over on the right, the sample consists of frontline managers. Just over half were frontline. We had 30% middle managers, and then we had senior leaders and C-suite. You can see that they came from a variety of industries, particularly technology, education, financial services, hospitals and healthcare, government, transportation, communications, and utilities. People were embedded in a variety of roles and departments within their organizations, ranging from administration and management through to production. And you can see down at the bottom that we had data from a cross section of organizations of different sizes, 44% working in relatively small organizations. So this should give you some context in terms of who we heard from. Again, an exploratory study, but with some really rich insights. So with that context set, let's jump into the data itself. I have about 6 or 7 slides, and where we wanted to start is just prevalence rates. To what extent is AI being utilized within organizations? And what we found is that 3/4 of respondents report either widespread or growing adoption of AI. And if you look over on the right, when we cut that data by industry, and again, a very small study with some small n sizes by industry, so interpret these with a bit of caution. What we see are some differences by industry. When you saw this, Elissa, you said one of the things you were curious about is to what extent are people using AI at work? Anything that caught your attention or stood out? Were you surprised by anything here?
No, I think this reflects my own experience. Our firm's experience in these sectors, I think, reflects what we're seeing in terms of sectors that are more all in on AI and others that are more hesitant. So I wasn't surprised by this data. Um, I was surprised by the number of no adoption being that low, but like you said, it's a very small sample size. So I don't want to read too much into that. I'd be curious what that would look like on a broader scale.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but I mean, to some extent, this is very consistent with some of those contextual data points that we surfaced to start the conversation, that the utilization of AI in organizations is growing and increasing and becoming more and more common. It seems each day and each month that goes by.
Well, anecdotally, my mother uses AI all the time and she's a retiree. So I think if she's using it, then anybody can.
So we are seeing when we then asked, how is it being utilized? What we see over on the left is that it's being utilized for a variety of topics, but probably what many of us would expect. 8 out of 10 respondents are saying that generative AI is being used to write and summarize and create content. We're also seeing over half of the respondents are saying that AI is used to support dashboards and analytics. And then we start to get into some nuance findings, 50% saying that's used to support service channels. Performance management, 45%. I thought that was a high number. I wasn't expecting to see this high of a number. And then recruiting and hiring and no tools being utilized. But this, I think, probably mirrors the way that many of us are using AI either for work or in our personal lives. And a lot of that has to do with the synthesis and the summarization of information. In terms of the hopes and opportunities over on the right, when we asked people in an open-ended setting, what we found when we coded those comments is that speed, and you talked about this, Elisa, in the setup, is really the dominant benefit that's coming through. Over half of the comments from this group of leaders talked about faster workflows and increased efficiency, followed by automation of repetitive tasks and freeing employees uh, to do higher value work. The quote down at the bottom was the most endorsed comment to this open-ended question, what new hopes and opportunities is AI eliciting? And I think it really pulls together a lot of the themes that we're seeing. We're seeing a much higher level of efficiency from our employees because they are using AI. So this clearly the upside of AI at work. Anything here, Elisa, that caught your eye or stood out?
I mean, again, nothing here really surprised me. Maybe the size of that number, 79% being so large, but this reflects my experience and what I'm seeing across my clients. It also speaks to the comment I raised earlier when you asked me about my own perspective on AI and my own usage. And I made this comment about how I use it, but then I worry about the impact it'll have on me. So if I'm using Gen AI or if a team member is using Gen AI to summarize, that is a huge efficiency gain. The question then becomes, at least for me, what is lost in delegating that task to AI? And sometimes it's nothing, but sometimes it's something. And for myself, as I lean more on this tool to summarize and make sense of my own thinking, I worry about diminishing my ability to do that myself over time. And I think about myself, I do a lot of coaching in my role, and often leaders are seeking speed, right? Let's do things faster, let's be more productive. And it makes me wonder about that coach role shifting to let's take 30 minutes and slow down this week, because there is still a lot of value in slower thinking, and so it's picking and choosing your moments for when you're going to want and prioritize and need that faster workflow, that increased efficiency, and when you're going to want to slow down and not lean into the bias to action that AI generated outputs push us towards. And I think there is a role for someone external or in a coach role to help people pick and choose those moments and balance their use of AI so that they continue to grow their skills and continue to make the best decisions.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think those are two really important points, right? That AI has this ability as it penetrates organizations and penetrates our life space to speed everything up. And there are some benefits and there are some um, pitfalls associated with this constant need for speed. So I think that's one important point. And so figuring out when we intentionally pause becomes important at work and in life. And then also skill atrophy. The more we rely on AI, the more certain skills like writing or synthesizing or summarizing or comprehending could atrophy. And we did see that in a couple of slides. We're going to see this cohort calling that out. So I think those are two good points to highlight. I think, what about this cost reduction, the return on AI? We're seeing this in headlines, right? A lot of people are investing heavily in AI, but there is some question about the return on
Yes.
AI.
Yes.
And we see from these 105 leaders that only 13% are talking about cost reduction and business growth as a benefit that they're currently seeing. Any surprises there?
None. I think there's been lots of studies that have shown that the benefits we are expecting from AI have in many industries yet to materialize. And we were talking about this before the call started, but how do you measure the success of your AI integration? And that feeds in, that depends on the way you set up your AI plan. What particular metrics were you seeking to shift using AI? What new metrics may you want to measure given your adoption of AI? And then you can begin to look over time, is this working the way we want? I think for a lot of organizations, there's like two camps, right? There's the one that's like, everyone should use AI, figure it out yourself. I want to see more AI everywhere. And I think we've all heard the leader who says things like that. And then there's the other side where it's this is the one specific use case where you're allowed to use AI and you must be very careful. Regardless of which way you're taking, your plan needs more than either of those two pieces. And that's what's going to help you to see the proof in the pudding. And I think as of yet, there hasn't been a lot of documented large scale results across industries. So that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. Yeah. We asked about how AI, because it's being deployed so broadly for this population, um, how is it changing expectations over on the left? And what new concerns is it raising over on the right? And so let's start on the left. The question that we asked, open-ended, was how, if at all, is AI changing expectations around how work gets done in your organization? And there were three main themes that emerged. One is deadlines are being shortened. Two is that workflows are being streamlined. And three is that throughput expectations are raising or being heightened. And so, what becomes so interesting is when we looked at the comments surrounding these themes over on the left, there is a double-edged sword aspect to AI, you could argue. And this really jumps out as we start to compare some of these open-ended responses. If you look over on the far left, in response to this question, you can now do hours of work in minutes, but we're also hearing that some people down at the bottom may think they need to outperform AI in order to keep their job. So as timelines and deadlines are shortened, there is this benefit and there is this pressure. In terms of workflows, Up top, AI is changing expectations from volume to value, where we are now expected to spend more time on creative problem solving and less on repetitive execution. That also getting at the higher throughput expectations. But if you look down at the bottom, the executive level believes that all employees should be able to be much more productive with the use of AI. They don't have to use it, so they don't see how cumbersome AI can, in fact, be. I mean, this goes back to that stat that I opened with that 98% of CEOs think that AI would benefit their organization immediately. When you are working with AI, the experience can be a bit more challenging and, to this quote, cumbersome. And then the last two, positive. AI is opening up time to invest human expertise better in exploration, decision making, and complex challenges, things that humans should be doing. But things are expected to be completed quicker. So more work is then given to employees. It has increased expectations. And I think some of this is where you started, Elissa, which is so many people as they bring AI into work, are thinking about the technological capabilities and the productivity gains, but they are failing to think about the actual experience of work, the pressure, and the downside associated with AI. Over on the right, and then I'd love to hear any of your thoughts. What new concerns and anxieties is AI eliciting? I think many of us would have expected this first response, job loss and role displacement. 37% of respondents wrote about that. Data privacy and information security, and inaccurate outputs and hallucination. Those were the top three themes. Down at the bottom, AI is raising concerns about job displacement, data privacy, misinformation, and the need to ensure ethical and accurate use of AI systems. That quote really touches on quite a bit of concern and anxiety that was common in this data. Anything here that really jumps off the page in terms of new expectations, both positive and negative, or new concerns?
So much of this. So I mean, to your point about the challenge of using AI, for sure. Sometimes I use AI and I think it would have been much faster to just do this myself. But that might be a problem with my own prompting or my own training of the tool. And I always try to bring myself back to that. Um, but I think what's really interesting in the positive comments. So we've got AI is changing the expectation from volume to value. We're now expected to spend more time on creative problem solving and less on repetitive execution. And then the other one about opening time to invest human expertise in things like exploration, decision making, complex challenges. Part of selfishly why I wanted to do this was so I do a lot of leadership development training, and I've been thinking what would be an interesting module about leadership development and AI. And I just had this thought right now, even though I've read this deck multiple times. I do think people need guidance around how to use AI for different types of tasks. Because I look at these quotes and I would argue that many use AI for creative problem solving, that many use AI for decision making and complex challenges. And I'm not saying that's wrong or bad, but I am saying as leaders for ourselves and for the teams that we manage, we want to think through where and when tasks should be delegated to AI, where AI should be used as a partner, where AI should be used for polish, where AI should be used for preliminary thinking. And I'm not saying I could even begin to have all of the answers on this for an organization, but it would certainly make for an interesting module to get leaders to think through the characteristics of particular tasks and the role of AI in those tasks and how to guide team members and also how to structure our own time so that we can see the maximum benefit. Because it's interesting, I'm in this like Slack group for HR professionals, and the number of times I've seen now chats about what they're calling copy paste leadership. This idea that like my leader only talks to me through AI. All things are
Mm,
being copied and pasted. It feels like decisions
mhm,
are being made by AI and not the
mm,
person. I do think that if we talk about the instant gratification of technology, there's little more instantly gratifying than the way an AI talks to you. Like I said, my kid now has this AI in her room, which scares the heck out of me. She talks to it and she asks it questions and she asks it to read her a bedtime story and she asks it facts and she talks to it about her day. We like talking to AI. So if we get in the habit of talking to AI, of liking talking to AI, we may talk, and I'm talking about LLMs here. There's lots of other kinds of AIs. I recognize I'm focusing on LLMs. There is a version where the scope of AI's role in our work creeps. And as leaders, and regardless of our level in the organization, we should have a point of view on where and when AI plays a role. And that can be flexible and evolving, but I wonder if organizations have robust guidelines and plans around those things to help structure the way AI shapes culture, the way AI shapes work.
Yeah. And we will see in just a couple of slides how many organizations do have robust guidelines in place. But it sounds like for you, as it relates to work and then personal life, understanding the boundary conditions of when to use AI, how to use AI are really critical and important. And we do see, I think, some confusion around boundary conditions and the best way to use AI in these comments. So I think it's a really interesting point. So despite these concerns that we're talking about, most respondents in this sample do think that AI is having a positive impact at work. In fact, 74% say that AI is having either a very positive impact on their culture and team dynamics or a somewhat positive impact. The remaining 27% are mixed. What stood out to me, and I'm sure it stood out to you, Elissa, is no one in this research sample said that it was having a somewhat negative or a very negative impact. Mixed was really the bottom of the scale for this population. When you look over on the right and we take a look at this data and we cut it by management level, we do see some nuanced differences. If we look down the very positive column, you can see circled, it is the senior management, and I know it's only 10, so huge grain of salt, but 4 out of 10 of those senior managers are saying AI is having a very positive impact in my organization. If we go to the somewhat positive column right next to it, we see those frontline managers are a bit elevated at 54%, not dramatically out of norm with the overall, but just a bit more in the somewhat positive column. And then when we go to the mixed, we see it's middle management and the C-suite. C-suite, interestingly enough, I know it's only 8 cases, but split between very positive, 38%, and mixed at 38%. But we're not seeing negative responses from these leaders and managers. And, I think we need to think about to what extent we need to be concerned. I know that was my initial response is when we are seeing so much tension around AI in the general public, and we're not seeing any in this sample, what does that mean? We followed up on this question with 2 branches. So if you were very positive or somewhat positive, we asked you the question on the far left. When AI does have a positive impact on culture or team dynamics, what conditions are present? And for those that instead said that AI is having a mixed impact, we asked that branch question over on the right. What factors make AI's impact on team culture unclear or mixed? And when you zip through the bolded headlines, I think we get some really interesting conditions that start to inform how we do create a positive culture around AI. When it's having a positive impact, what leaders, managers, and supervisors are saying is first, it's framed as supportive, not a replacement. Second, training and practical understanding are put in place. Third, leadership communicates clearly and builds trust around AI and how it's being used. Fourth, there are guardrails, to your point, Elissa, and there's human oversight. And fifth, AI delivers visible work benefits. Those are all associated with a positive impact of AI at work. Now, for those that said it's more mixed, they said the benefits come with social strain. So there is a push and pull between efficiency gains and job security or job insecurity or role change. Adoption is uneven across people and teams. Skepticism and stigma undermine buy-in. Policies and norms are unclear or unstable, going to your point, Elissa, about the importance of clear policy and guidelines. And there is a over-reliance and quality concerns that are creating a sense of hesitation. So people are either over-relying on the platform or the platforms or AI is not producing the quality that people expect. I think there is a comment that may have come in, and if that is the case, I would love to hear, Gabby, if there was a question from the audience.
Yes, we had a question whether there was any indication that muted negative responses towards AI are in part due to concern that if you don't get on board, you'll be left behind.
That's a really interesting hypothesis. We didn't see evidence of that in the data, but that is something that I think is worth exploring within organizations. There's such a press, at least at the leadership level, you could argue, to be using AI, that the opportunity to push back may not be the case. That's one way to interpret that data. When I looked at the data, what I see is that there is a positive regard for AI, but then there is also this healthy concern about the human impact of AI that these leaders, managers, and supervisors are articulating. So I didn't get the sense from this data that everybody is all in on AI. I got the sense that people are seeing it works effectively, but there is quite a bit of concern about how it's being implemented in organizations. And for that, I think these leaders, managers, and supervisors deserve a good degree of credit just to have that perspective. I'm going to keep pushing through because I know we're running out of time and we have a couple more slides to get through. And then Elissa, I'd love to hear your comments before we start to wrap up. You surfaced the importance of guidelines a couple of slides ago. And so one of the questions that we asked about is, how would you describe your organization's current approach to AI-related guidance and governance for employees? And what stands out is that only 44% of this research sample said that there are clear and well-communicated guidance around AI in their organization. The remaining 56% said that there's either some guidance or informal norms or very limited or no guidance. What is so interesting is over on the right, we see a clear and strong correlation between organizations that have clear and well communicated guidelines around AI and the impact that AI is having in organizations. So specifically, if you look, there were 46 people that said they have clear and well communicated AI guidelines. Of those, 41% said that AI is having a very positive impact on their organization. And if you look down in the bottom right and you see the trends over in that mix column, you see this linear pattern of as guidance goes from some to informal to limited, the mixed impact of AI on culture really becomes pronounced. So this is what you were sensing, Elissa, is that guidelines make a big difference. I'm going to push through, I think, just one more slide, and then I'd love to get your thoughts on any and all of this. Because guidelines are so important, we did ask, how could organizations create a healthier AI experience for their employees? And so what stands out is that quote right up top, clear guidelines on how to use AI and when to use AI was one of the most salient comments. When we looked across all the comments that we received for this open-ended question, four main themes emerged. One, provide training. Two, set clear AI policies and procedures. Three, established human-centered AI ethics. And four, provide psychological safety and job security. Over on the right, we have a bit more detail around the kinds of support and guardrails that emerged. Training, policies, communication, it really is the same content that we're summarizing over on the left. But what really stands out in these last couple of slides is we need guidance, right? We can't just implement the tool, implement the technology, and expect the productivity gains. There could be some, but they're going to be choppy and inconsistent. And there are going to be a whole bunch of negative consequences if we're not approaching this in a mindful, intentional way. Elissa, what stands out to you as we wrap up the field study and move into implications? What thoughts on these last couple of slides?
I just also think that as leaders, we should have a clear vision of the what is achieved through those productivity gains. So if suddenly we can achieve more or the same in less time? What is the goal of what is done with that additional time? Because people feel nervous that that means we'll need less people, which makes perfect sense and has been playing out across multiple organizations. And so if the goal around productivity is cost reduction, then let's not lie. We are looking to cut roles. But if the goal around increased productivity is around more space for innovation or is around different kinds of development, let's articulate a vision around what that's going to be. And that's going to help get people excited about the time that AI is going to free up. Like another anecdote from my kid, but they're doing an AI pilot at her school where children will do all their learning in 2 or 3 hours in the morning using AI, and then the rest of the day will be for other things. And my big question as a parent was, what are those other things? And at first, I didn't have a good answer. So you're going to cram all the learning into 2 to 3 hours. And what are the other things? Now they're getting to a good answer. I think employees want that answer too, right? So I'm going to change the way I work. I'm going to be more productive. What then? Are you going to cut your FTEs or are we going to look to grow, expand, achieve something different? And let's get excited about that vision because that's going to help get us excited about leaning into AI.
Yeah, and that quote down at the bottom, it's a bit hidden, but it really echoes what I hear you saying, and that is that leaders need to be straightforward. They really need to explain to the workforce what happens with the productivity gains that result from AI. I know a couple of things. One is I know we're at 12:45 and some of you need to depart. If so, apologies that this is going a little long, but we will send out the recording and we will start to wrap up with the last section of implications. So that's the first thing. If you have to run, by all means, we'll miss you, but we completely understand and we'll send out the recording. The second thing is it looks like there may be, Gabby, another question that popped in or perhaps a comment as we roll into the last section.
That was someone saying thank you. I do know someone has their hand raised, so I don't know, Patrick, if you'd like me to take them off mute or if you'd like them to kind of type in their question or comment in the chat.
If that person could type their question in, that might help us just from a timing perspective. I'll
Okay.
zip through a couple of slides and then I'm happy, Elissa and I are happy to field that question. Let's start to wrap up with some implications. And again, we're going to go through this quickly, but we will send out the deck. And there are quite a bit of details on these next couple of slides that are worth reading through, and I'm just going to skim over. I think there are three main takeaways that we need to keep in mind. The first is that as we bring AI into our organizations, Elissa and I have really emphasized this, we cannot think about this simply as a new technology. We need to think about this from a human perspective. And when you start to think about the combination of people, culture, norms, ways of working, and technology, you really are in a socio-technical space. The whole idea of socio-technical systems theory is that organizations work better when we optimize and harmonize the human with the technology. And this goes back all the way to the 50s and is being implemented as organizations bring in AI. The point is, if we're going to integrate AI into our organizations, we need to, on the left, think through the cultural implications, the guidelines, leadership, employee value propositions, training, performance management, technology, procedures, goals, and metrics, and a number of other things. We need to think holistically. And if we're not thinking holistically, if we are just dropping the technology in, we're going to be really overlooking a lot of the issues that employees, leaders, and managers are facing. So that's the first thing, is to bring a socio-technical perspective to AI implementation. The second is to talk to your workforce. This is a small exploratory study. It will generate, I think, some questions, hopefully, to explore in your own organization. But obviously, you can't take this data and assume that this is what's happening in your own organization. In fact, what we heard back from this population is that within their own organizations, there are these nuanced differences. And so having a conversation with your own workforce, either through Remesh or traditional focus groups or one-on-one conversations, is a second really smart thing to do. Over on the right, a whole bunch of really good open-ended questions. Open-end is going to generate quite a bit of insight that closed-ended questions are probably going to miss. At the end of the day, asking both open and closed is probably the smartest thing. So that's the second thing is talk to your workforce. I know we're moving quick, but we want to be sure to get through all this and take any questions you have at the end. The third is we really need to be building human-centric AI cultures. What we saw in this study is that leaders, managers, and supervisors consistently express the need to take a human-centered approach to AI. Yes, they are positive about AI and its impact in their organizations, but we clearly heard the need for their organizations to be grounded ethically and morally and procedurally. And so taking this human-centered approach to AI implementation is critical. For those of you who know Edgar Schein, um, you know that he talks about 11 ways to embed culture in an organization. And what we were able to do is take a look at Schein's 11 ways of embedding culture over on the right, look at this data, use Remy, the research agent within Remesh. And Remy did a wonderful job of surfacing actual interventions or activities or strategies to support ways of embedding a human-centric AI culture. We'll send this out so you can look in more detail. Those are the three main implications. Just two more thoughts as we start to wrap up. At the end of the day, the future of AI, both within organizations and outside organizations, really depends on the decisions that we are making. Remy really highlighted and summarized over on the left, AI is mostly experienced in this data set as a benefit when it increases speed, information, empowerment, and provides structured support. But it becomes a threat when it shifts into pressure, ambiguity, or replacement. Some of you may know David Rock's SCARF model. It is a wonderful way to think about what humans need in social systems, essentially status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And what's so interesting in this data and what Remy really helped us to understand is that AI can be a benefit and meet our status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness needs, or it can threaten each of those core needs. And so, what we need to think about within our own organizations is how we are deploying AI and how it is impacting the employee experience from either a SCARF model perspective or any other model of human motivation well-being that you subscribe to. Last but not least, as we make these decisions, we need to keep wisdom in mind. Wisdom is a big, broad topic that a lot of organizational psychologists don't talk about. I was at SIOP beginning of May, and Kate Bravery from Mercer talked about the importance of wisdom as it relates to AI. And I think she really hit the nail on the head. Wisdom is a really robust concept for us to think about and to consider when we are talking about something as complex as AI. What is wisdom? There are a lot of different definitions. I like Sternberg's balance theory of wisdom. He talks about wisdom is seeking the common good, balancing stakeholder needs, considering short and long-term goals, adapting environments, combining intelligence, and all of this informed by tacit knowledge. And if we keep this model of wisdom or any other model of wisdom in mind, I think it really starts to highlight how we make trade-offs between what we value, what we need, and the impact that we're having on each other as it relates to AI, both within organizations and outside organizations. So that was a lot to take in the last couple of minutes. We'll send this out, and if you have questions, by all means, you can drop a note to either Elissa or myself. We're happy to follow up with any questions or thoughts that emerge from this. But as I bring this to a close, Elissa, and get your final reactions in the last couple of minutes, anything that stands out to you or anything as the audience, and we may have lost most of them, wants to ask about in the remaining couple of minutes of today's presentation.
I'm certainly open to audience questions before I speak. Does anyone have any questions?
Maybe Elisa, as those roll in, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I would love to hear your thoughts on takeaways, implications. Did you learn through this process some of what you were hoping to learn? And what's your takeaway consultatively?
I think I learned what I was hoping to learn. Hmm. I think sometimes people need to be poked into self-awareness around things like this. And so it just, in a lot of ways, made me want to continue the conversation with clients and with people I work with across multiple capacities because there is something about the speed of AI that makes us engage in less self-reflection. And I think about that becoming, even in my own work, like a rhythm that at once is exciting and also scary. And so I think this study deepened my understanding, but also reinforced the need to continue this conversation and to keep thinking about this in my own work, both at MacPhie and with the clients I serve. How can we continue to pursue these questions and have a deeper, more well-rounded understanding of the impact of AI on culture? I see
Wonderful.
we did get a question.
We did. Were there any questions or research done on intention for or leaning towards actual implementation or timelines for it?
No, not in this study. Um, we really focused on those 11 questions that we ran through. And as we send out the deck, you'll be able to look at those questions in more detail. But no, we didn't ask about implementation strategies specifically or timelines specifically. So the short answer is no. If whoever asked that, I don't want to make you keep typing in your thoughts. But we didn't ask that. I would love to hear more about your interest in that. So by all means, either chat that back or reach back out to us, and we'd be happy to talk more about that.
We do have another question. Where do you recommend this work lives within a typical organization? Who owns it?
This is a great question. It depends on the organization. But I think if we say, person X, you are on AI implementation for our organization, and HR, you're on the impact on culture, I think you are creating a false division. So I think it would depend on your organization and where you are focusing your AI implementation. But if the AI implementation is going across broadly across the organization, you may want to put together some sort of steering committee or working group that's going to help you understand the impact on various groups depending on their utilization. And with that input, you can develop your strategy proactively and then respond reactively to what's happening. I worry about when we say people in culture, well, or HR, however you're titling this group, owns culture and therefore they own the cultural impacts of X. They should be a key voice, but I don't necessarily think that that should be segmented off from the strategic priority around AI. It's going to lead to patchy results. So, whomever is leading the charge around AI implementation at your organization should probably assemble some sort of community around them to help design a strategy related to the people impact, would be my recommendation. Patrick, I see you nodding, but please add or build.
Yeah, we did a webinar last February, and the same critical point emerged then, which is that for AI implementation to go well, it cannot be owned within one functional unit. It's really when we create these cross-functional committees, when we bring together the head of culture or head of HR with the chief technology officer and other critical committee members and roles, including frontline employees. That's where we're really going to get, I think, the most robust understanding of the way that AI is impacting the employee experience, the customer experience, productivity, profitability, all those critical metrics. So we need to bring together these broad cross-functional, cross-level groups really to talk about how AI is being implemented. So I agree. We have a couple more questions. We have just a couple more minutes, but it looks like another question may have rolled in.
Yes. How would you recommend a leader gauge concerns about eventual job loss in the organization?
I I love this question. I think it's a good question. My answer may not be I think honesty and transparency is really important. And whenever I give an answer like this, people are like, but there are things we can say and there's things we can't say. And I say, okay, okay, okay. But if people are nervous about job loss in your organization, the related to AI or otherwise, the best way to assuage those concerns is not with a load of baloney, but with honesty. And so I think helping people understand within what's appropriate to share what the plan may be and when they can expect to hear. I think back to the SCARF model. Whenever I teach the SCARF model, I say people in the workplace need certainty in order to be able to perform and thrive. Often we can't offer team members certainty. We don't know what is going to happen, or we can't promise them that things are going to remain stable. But what we can do is share what we know, let people know when they'll be hearing more information, and continue to follow up regularly. So depending on what you can share, sharing what's appropriate, but then saying you will hear from me at our next team meeting, town hall, whatever the touch point is, and I'll continue to update you on this information as I have it. But that's typically my advice. Depends on the red tape in your org, but people appreciate when you are forthright with them.
Yeah,
We
excellent.
still have quite a few people on the call. Are you guys open to answering another question?
Sure.
Yeah, why don't we take just a couple of more and then we'll all let each other go.
Okay.
So please, let's take one or two more.
Did you get a sense AI is transforming work and there's no looking back and try to embrace this is integral to the future?
Yes. I mean, short answer. I don't think we're going to be able to go back. Um, and I think that the reason I say that beyond just gut level is when you look at the prevalence rates, the utilization rates, the penetration rates, both in our daily life, which were over 50%, and this rapid adoption faster than other recent technology. And we look within organizations, we're seeing that it is being deployed and implemented um, so broadly, so widely, and that's only increasing. I don't think we're going to be able to go back. I don't know,
I
Elisa, you
I
have a
agree, but then I think about those undergrads booing those speakers, and I think about anecdotally some people saying, you know what, I know I'm supposed to use this, but it's so frustrating to me, and I just would prefer to. I don't know. I think things are changed. Do I think it's something that 100% no going back? It remains to be seen. Let's see. I don't know. I don't
yeah,
know the answer. I
yeah.
wish I had a good answer, but I think right now there's been a seismic shift, and that's why everybody is talking about it. But there could be a massive error that explodes it all, and there's certainly a part of me that thinks that's possible. So I don't know.
There is clearly in the public mindset a strong desire for more regulation. And as we opened, and as you note, Lisa, there is quite a bit of pushback that we're seeing at these college graduations. And, I do think we need to figure out if the pushback, the anxiety, the concern is about AI in and of itself as a technology, or the way that we are utilizing and deploying AI, and whether or not, going all the way back to Pope Leo's comment, it is a technology that increases exploitation, domination, repression, or in fact opens up new levels of insight, understanding, well-being. All of that is, I think, to be determined. So it will be an interesting journey for all of us, and we're all going to have a seat right up front. I think with that, first of all, I want to thank you, Elisa, for being such a wonderful guest, having so many powerful insights that complemented everything that we learned and heard from these 105 leaders, managers, and supervisors. So thank you. We could not have had such a rich discussion without you or designed such a compelling study. And thank you to the audience. for sticking with this. And sorry we went a little long, but I think it was a really rich, powerful discussion. If you did need to drop, we will send you out a deck. And last but not least, Gabby and Emma, thank you for pulling all this together. We hope you all enjoyed, and we will see all of you on our next webinar. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.